Hello, everyone. It's 9 p.m. here in Manila, so let me say good evening to everyone who shares my time zone. And to all of you who are just starting your day, good morning. And good afternoon to everyone who has taken their lunch. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yna Reyes, and I will be the moderator of this webinar. So, a few things about me. I serve MAI as a board member of MAI-Asia and as an editorial trainer. I'm formerly the Publishing and Communications Director of OMF Literature, where I worked full-time for 32 years until my retirement last April. But I'm still involved with OMF Literature as its publishing consultant, and I'm also a children's book author. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this webinar, especially because I know her personally. She and I were roommates at a workshop on writing for children a few years ago. That was a week-long workshop, so we got to know each other well. And she's one of the most inspiring young women in ministry that I know. Janina Marie Rivera is a writer and a teacher. She has written this beautiful book. See this book there? A Night Bird Sings of Blindness and Fear, a book based on her personal faith journey. And she also has written a children's book on disability entitled Kaya ni Nina in Filipino. In English, that's Nina Can Do It. She co-authored the devotional Dawns, a devotional for self-care and spiritual growth, with two other female authors, Isa Garcia and Ida Torres. And she is one of the poets in the poetry collection Joyful Light. Aside from being a published author with OMF Literature, Janina is editor-in-chief of One Voice magazine in the Philippines and the Dream Kits of United Prayer Rising, released in Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Europe. She is also the youth representative of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem, Philippine branch. As a licensed teacher, Janina dives into subjects like creative writing, world literature, humanities, and speech. She's currently writing a textbook with DIWA Learning Systems on creative nonfiction for senior high school students. And Janina, joining us now are more than 100 participants from 30 countries. So why don't you say hello to them?
Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be with you tonight here in the Philippines. It's nighttime. I know for some of you, it's like waking time or something like that. But thank you so much for making time for this. It's such a privilege and pleasure to be here with you.
Yes. Yes, in today's webinar, Janina will share with us her journey in writing A Nightbird Sings of Blindness and Fear, a book on sickness, anxiety, faith, and healing. It was once an academic requirement in the university before it was published as a book and won the Gintong Aklat, or in English, Golden Book, the Golden Book Award just last year. So in this webinar, we will learn practical ways on how to turn our personal testimony into a book, as well as strategies in creating a compelling narrative. But before we dive into that, I'd like to ask Janina. Janina, when did you discover that you can actually write? And
Oh,
how did you nurture that gift? So share with us your beginnings as a writer.
okay. It all started in childhood, like as early as around 5 years old, six. I grew up in a place where there are a lot of books, and my grandma, both grandmas actually, dad's side and mom's side, they both write. And
Mhm.
the mom of my dad, like she kept a typewriter in Baguio, like one of the cities up north in the Philippines. And as a little kid, I would type on that typewriter, and as very very simple stories like a cat chasing a dog, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And hearing things like wow from lolo lola, grandpa grandma, and then showing the story to my parents and them saying wow, this is a good story. Even if it may have been super duper simple, but hearing affirmation from them, that boosted whatever thoughts I had about being a writer, wanting to be a writer when I grew up. So it started there, and then yeah, that was the start. But of course, I had to do other things, like go to school and all that.
So you were surrounded by books
Oh
and readers,
yes.
no? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now let's put a spotlight on your personal faith journey that led you to writing this book, A Night Bird Sings of Blindness and Fear. How did it all begin, Janina?
Okay. I am going to show some slides because at the age of 14, I was diagnosed with something called an arteriovenous malformation. So um, I will share. Okay. I will share. Okay, there. Everyone can see it?
There.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, um, at 14 years old, a vein burst in my brain, and it came from this kind of abnormality, wherein the blood vessels here are pretty much a hybrid sort of blood vessel because they bypass the capillaries. Isn't it that the arteries and capillaries and veins all connect to each other? So I was born without capillaries in this area, but then not at the side of my brain, but here at the back, the area where the vision of the control of vision is for the brain. And when it burst, it caused a lot of damage in my optical area, and it also disrupted the normal blood flow in my brain and the circulation of oxygen. So because of this, so this happened at 14. Mm, I knew I knew that I had a story to tell. Of course, it wasn't something that came right away, like this knowledge that, oh, this is a story. It didn't come right away at 14. I had to go through it. And it was only in looking back that it made me go, wow, what happened to me is something that is pretty unique. And it can inspire people, or it can help people who have brain issues, or who are struggling with sickness, or who are struggling with the emotions that come with sicknesses. So that was the start of it. Okay. And then, okay, let me change. All right. So I knew that I could use my story as a testimony of God's love and faithfulness. And I always had that dream of writing a book. Like, I think it's one of those things, so like as a child, when you write stories and then you're like, what if I write something bigger than a story? And in fact, high school days, if I remember, yes, high school days, I attempted to write my first book, but then, it was such a teeny bopper thing. And I think I ended at page 79 or something like that. And I never went back to it. But as early as then, it was already planted in my heart. What if I wrote a book? And I knew that my story of having an AVM and overcoming it, I knew that that story could help others, especially those struggling with fear and physical sickness. Because one of the emotions that really shook me when I was undergoing the AVM was fear. So I told myself, okay, if I were to write a book in the future, then I might as well sharpen my skills in writing. So after high school, I enrolled at university, and I made sure that I took a course that had to do with writing. So I took literature and and uh, and English, so double major. And then after that, like after a few years, I took creative writing. I took my graduate studies in creative writing, and so this became a thesis, my thesis. I was like, okay, I'm going to turn my story into a thesis. So yes, that's like that's where it began.
Oh, so it started as a thesis. So Janina, while you were writing your thesis, did it occur to you that it could probably become a book?
Yes, yes. And one thing beautiful about the program that I took was that when you enter, they really tell you that the end product is something that
Mm,
should be capable of being published. Of course, there was no guarantee. It's like just shoot for the stars, write something, write your best, and then submit. So not everyone who goes to school gets things published, gets their thesis published. But it really is something that I aspired for. And when I heard that, I was like, yes, I think I will. So as early as my freshman year, I told myself that yes, I will try to get this published. So yeah.
oh, so
Okay.
yeah, so how long did it take you to write the thesis?
10 years. Pretty long.
Oh,
Pretty
10
long.
years.
10
Oh,
years.
really?
Yes.
Wow.
Because, yeah,
Oh,
actually, I'm not proud of the length of time. When I think about it, I'm like, that could have been shortened. It's just that after I did the proposal presentation, like the proposal, we call it the proposal defense in front of the panel, I decided to stop. And I was telling myself, well, I'm going to come back to this. And I was thinking maybe after a year or two, but then it stretched to 10 years because I got really
mm,
busy with life. It was only on the 10th year that things happened to my life, things really outside of graduate school, outside of outside. And suddenly it was as if a stop button happened in my life, and I felt God go, okay, now you can go back. Like I went back to writing it, and that's when I finished it. But that was after, yes, the length of 10 years, so pretty
wow.
long.
But it was worth it, of course. So
Oh
Janina,
yes, yes.
yeah, now can you please walk us through your writing journey? And while she is sharing this with us, friends, you can, if you have questions while she is sharing, you can write your questions on the chat box or on I think we have a Q&A box also. So you can write your questions there and we'll entertain the questions after Janina's presentation. Okay, over to you, Janina.
All right, thank you. So I will again share my screen. Okay, so this is the last one, the one a while ago. Okay. All right. Now, in graduate school, I had this particular exercise in class called the Opaque mirror exercise. And here we were challenged by the teacher to write about something that people didn't know about us. The bad part, the wounded part, the scary part, things that we did not want to let out of the closet. So idiomatically, we call it the skeleton in our closet. So we had that exercise. And so, of course, the big question was, could I look at myself honestly? It was a short assignment in class that would turn into my thesis and then transform into a book. So the thing about this one was it was a big challenge because I was thinking, I had this AVM at 14. When I entered graduate school, I was in my 20s. I was around 25 years old. So that was like a good deal. 9 years, no? Something like 9 years um, since the AVM happened. And so I was thinking it was a story that I could write about quickly, right away. But I realized like while I was doing my draft, I was just crying and crying. And I realized that, oh, this is a story that's still affecting the deep parts of me. So it was something like being honest about your own life story. It allows you to go to raw emotions, the emotions that you had at 14, like for me. for example, the emotions that I had during the difficult time of my life. And I guess it's something that I need to warn you about. Like, if you are wanting to write about your life, there will be parts that, because life isn't exactly a walk in the park, right? It's not a bed of roses. And so you'll have to ask yourself, can I look at myself honestly, like the wounded parts, and am I willing to share them in my writing? Okay, so here are some questions that I had to face. How vulnerable can I be? Okay, so now I throw that to you. How vulnerable can you be when you write? Are you prepared to show your wound? Are you disciplined enough to write? Are you willing to spend hours on writing and editing? And are you humble enough to be critiqued? Okay, these are hard questions for the writer because sometimes we think that, okay, I'm able to share just the surface of my wound. But remember, people who get your book, what they will look for is this person someone, or is this writer someone I can identify with? Can my wounds resonate with his wounds or her wounds? So it's really important to ask yourself, can I be vulnerable and open my life through my words and what I write? And then, of course, the discipline of writing. This is something like, for me, if you can write in less than 10 years, that's good. If I were to redo everything, like rewind, I would have not made 10 years pass. Okay, but a good question to ask is, are you disciplined enough to write? You'll really have to schedule yourself, and you'll really have to get yourself up from bed. Like, you have to be willing to forego certain Netflix shows. Okay, so that one. And then, are you willing to spend hours? Yes, a lot of hours. And then I like this last question: are you humble enough to be critiqued? Because if you are after publishing, remember that the story, your manuscript will not belong to you anymore. In a sense, like, it's not just for your eyes, not just for your heart. It is going to be shared by people, and in a way, it's like your story will become something for them too. So, are you humble enough to have um, words spoken about your manuscript? And this is one thing nice about having an editor. Okay, because the editor will help you, will cushion the blow, because the editor will make you see things that you might have not seen, but is there in your manuscript, and which has to be changed or revised or fixed. Okay, so the biggest obstacle in writing your personal narrative is actually you, because only you will be able to say, I will go on. Only you will say, I will stop watching TV, stop Facebook, and write. Okay, so, okay, next. Now, let me just move this. The topic that I chose had to have personal value to me. So even for you, if you are wanting to write a book, it has to have personal value for you. Why? Because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. You're going to spend a lot of money for commuting or for gas. You're going to research a lot, so it's a lot of energy, brain energy. It's a lot of work, and then a lot of electricity. If you're going to think about your electric bill while you type or while you research on things. And if you're a coffee drinker like me, it's going to take a lot of coffee. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And if as early as the writing stage, if you get bored or if you feel tired, chances are what's going to come out will be something. What you have to ask yourself, is what I'm writing boring? Is what I'm writing tiring? So you have to ask yourself these things. It has to have personal value to you, because you have to find that strength to continue, even if you know it's hard, because it will be hard, especially if you hit something like a writer's block, or you hit something like oh no, too much research, oh no, I'm crying too much, okay, things like that. So, and then there's no guarantee of a book publishing deal, of course, when you are still starting to write it, unless, of course, you already, like, let's say you and the publisher met, and the publisher says that, oh, we're looking for this kind of book, can you be the one to write it? Okay, but if it's something like you're going to pitch a story, and there is no guarantee, then you really have to tell yourself, if it doesn't get published, will it have value to me? And for me, I was like, yes, it will have value for me because I wanted also to know my own questions. Like I wanted to revisit that time, and I also had a question that I had wanted to solve during. I mean, okay, at 14 when the AVM happened, I experienced so much anxiety, and my question was, did the anxiety come from my AVM, my sickness, or was it something before that? Like, was it something mental? Like, I was grappling with the question of whether I had mental illness, beyond physiological. So, things like that. So again, it's like confronting the demons that you had during the time of the trial. Okay. Now, here are some tips. Okay, because if you are going to write a book, I don't know what to do with the boxes there. I put it on the side. Okay, if you are going to write a book, it's important that you have some sense of order because a book is it's a long piece of writing. It's not like one sitting you're done with writing it. No. So it's best to create an outline or a chapter summary. Like each chapter, you think about what can be in chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So this is something that for me, I needed to edit a million times. At least, even if I edited a million times, I had a skeleton to work with. So it's good to have a skeleton because you try your best to give stepping stones for your own writing. And then as you write, you realize that, hey, wait a minute, I think I can add this or that, which previously you didn't think about. Okay, but again, it's good to have a skeleton, an outline, okay, or a chapter summary. And then, of course, you research on your topic. So you ask yourself, are there any mysteries here that I want to solve? What are my own questions? So it's good to make a list. So even me, when I was doing my own thesis, I asked myself, what are my questions? I listed them down and I made sure that my research would cover these different questions. And then number 3, assess your protagonist or the main character. And if it's something like a personal testimony, the main character would be you. So for me, the I in the story. So is there anything that screams obvious in character development that you'd like to dig into? So in your assessment of the protagonist, you always look at the two worlds of the protagonist. The outside world. So what is obvious? What can the 5 senses pick up? So for example, the Janina at 14 that I wrote about, how was she like? Was she skinny? Was she tall? So the outside world, okay? Physically, like how was she? And then you go to the inner world. How about inside? Was she a shy person? Was she someone who was easily afraid? So things like that. So in your character development, you tackle those two worlds, the outside and the inside. So if you are also creating your book, your manuscript, you ask yourself this: how do I develop the character? Even if that character is an I character, yeah, how do you develop you as a character? Okay, so travel down memory lane. So when you think of that hard part that you are writing about, the hard part of your life, it's good to remember the diary entries or the journals that you wrote during the time of your trial. So it's when I was doing my thesis, which eventually became the book. Okay, I really went back to my diaries because I wanted to remember how raw were my feelings at the age of 14. What were my questions? And so even in the book, I include some of the poems that I wrote during that time. And and I wrote the things that God was showing me too. So remember God's promises to you. And for me, if your testimony is something that you want to to write to help others, it's good to include God's promises to you because every test comes with a promise, right? And it will show that when you write not just about your wound, but what God was saying to you while you were going through that wound, that's the kind of stuff that will help heal people, because that's the kind of stuff that helped heal you. And that was what was healing me. What was God telling me during the time of my trial? And then you pray as you write, because you know that what you have in your hands is something that can change lives. So you partner with the Holy Spirit. So for me, when I write a book, I don't just want to have mere words on the page. I want the words to jump with life. I want them to be supercharged with the breath of the Holy Spirit. I mean, if the Bible has the breath of God across every page of it, we can go to God and say, yes, God, yes, Holy Spirit, can you also breathe into this book through my words? Can you write through me? I am a vessel. Fill me and let it come out with my words. And I love that Revelations 12:11 says this: they triumphed over him, meaning the accuser of the brethren, by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So, how do we defeat the enemy in our lives? Yes, we have the blood of the Lamb, Jesus, but we also have our testimony. So, very powerful if we are able to write our testimony. Very powerful if you are able to turn your testimony into a book. Okay, now I use time to my advantage. I had 10 years. I'm gonna call it this. But as soon as I went back to school, I really was disciplined. I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure that I calendar my progress. Like after 2 weeks, I told myself I have to make sure that I'm done with the first, let's say, 5 chapters. So I have those kinds of little goals. Now, for me, writing this was not just an academic requirement. For me, it was a chance to craft well. Because remember this, when you write a story, you can do it in two ways. One is you just write it, where it's just the story, or you can write it excellently, where it becomes a story, but a story with what? With the craftsmanship that will make people go, wow. And it's not wrong to write something that will make people go, wow, because isn't God worthy also of excellent things that we produce? And couldn't it be that when we write, we say, Lord, yeah, I will create the best manuscript that I can write because you're worthy of the best. So I think that's something that we as Christians can can tell ourselves. So place boundaries on time to discipline yourself. So I really put it here, no? Capital TIP. Because for me, that's like my big my Waterloo when I did mine. Okay. So there, crafting tips. Keep a notebook for research, and even like sometimes you'll find inspiration just by, let's say, you go out of the house and you smell a certain scent, and then you realize that, oh, this is the scent that I think I want to incorporate in my writing. Okay, so keep a notebook for research, keep a notebook for things that hit you while you write. Okay, keep a notebook for your prompts, your starts, your false starts, because you will have false starts, you will have paragraphs that you're going to remove. Okay, I remember that my first draft of the manuscript, no, not the first draft of the whole, but the first draft of chapter 1 and 2, I wrote it down in my notebook, and I never used what I wrote down as the actual chapter 1 and chapter 2. Like I redid things, but it's good to oil yourself. Usually, I tell myself that even if something doesn't get written, like it doesn't get printed, I mean, as long as I'm able to oil my writing, then it helps with my skill. Okay, so ask yourself questions while writing and research your answers also. So again, if you find holes already, chances are your audience or your readers will find holes also. And then use your imagination. Believe it or not, even if it's a narrative, a personal narrative that you're writing, a testimony, you can actually use your imagination and be so creative. Like, for example, in the book that I wrote, the thesis slash manuscript thesis book. Okay, in the book that I wrote, there was a part where I talk about how I felt while going through certain machines, medical machines. And at 14, I remember telling myself, oh, it feels as if I'm in a spaceship. I'm in a rocket ship. So in my writing, I was like, this is something that I can use my imagination in. And so I wrote about visiting the planet Mars, things like that. So you stick to the facts, like whatever is verifiable, stick to the facts, like the dates, what happened. I mean, those that like it really happened. It has to be a true story, a true tale, but you can have artistic license for certain things, as long as when you read it, you go, yes, this is still the truth. Okay. Play with your metaphors. You ask yourself in the writing that I do, what metaphors can I use to capture not just my story, but also the emotion? So in A Night Bird Sings, I use the night bird as a metaphor for sickness. Okay. And then you develop it. And for me, it's like, it's nothing less than what Jesus would have done. Because, right, if you look at the New Testament, he would speak in parables. And parables would have this figurative level, this second level of meaning. And people would grasp it. They'd go, oh, yes. So for us, it's like, it's a nice thing if we can play with the figurative level also when we write. And then experiment with form. Just because it's a book or just because you're writing your testimony, it doesn't mean that it should be simply, sentences like that. I remember in my book, there's a part there where I introduce the well, the metaphor of a well. And it's as if my questions are being thrown into a well. And so I say things as if like a nursery rhyme. So if I may just read it a bit, I wish to know my sickness. I wish to know the name of my pain. I wish to know why. I wish to know. I wish to know. So, you can insert things. And then even in my book, I inserted a song. When I was listening to a particular medical machine again, the MRI, or was it an MRA? I'm forgetting now. MRA machine. And while there, I could hear the beats, three different beats of a song going through my head. And so I actually verbalize it in my book. So experiment with the form. And then do not be afraid to see your wound as a metaphor leading to something bigger. So, yes, mine was sickness. And then I used the metaphor of a bird. And then later on, I used the bird to sing something beautiful. It's really also up to you how you're going to lead the metaphor into something new. Now, one thing that you have to remember when you write your narrative, conflict makes your story interesting. Don't skip the conflict. I noticed that a lot of Christians, when they write their testimonies, they only give surface level conflicts. They say, for example, they say, oh, I grew up in a broken family, but God healed me after that. I mean, and you're like, what happened in between? What happened to your heartbreaking? I mean, what happened? So these are the things that will make people go, I want to know how my own wound can be healed. So walk me through yours. So the conflict has to do with the struggle. It has to do with how you struggled and how you overcame. And if you haven't overcome whatever it is that you're struggling with yet, at least write about what you are currently doing now to deal with the conflict, but make it real. Make yourself real. Make yourself human. I think it's the best thing to say. Make yourself very human. Okay, if you find yourself getting bored, okay, I mentioned this a while ago, chances are your readers will be bored too. So stop. If you're bored, stop and try to excite yourself with your writing again. Okay. And then when you draft, this is really a process. You will be revising and revising and revising. And I think it's an inner thing for writers. Like you write something and you just want to change some stuff. You revise. And for me, because this was a thesis, I had a thesis mentor. I'd show things to him. And then he would say, in Filipino, he'd say, pangit, pangit, pangit is ugly. Okay, so it'd be like ugly, ugly, ugly. And again, part of the process of writing is to be humble. And so you ask yourself, how can I make this ugly thing beautiful? And of course you'll have to listen to what your mentor says. So one of the things also that I would like to tell you is listen to your mentor. Look for a mentor. It would be good if your mentor is someone who has already been published, because he or she will know the process, will know the pain, will know the heartache of writing and taking a manuscript from 0 to 100. Okay, so that one. And then revise, revise, revise. And read well. Be mindful of your writing style. This one I cannot emphasize enough because whatever your reading diet is, it will actually also help in the formation of your own style. Okay, so read well. Don't let it just be reading those 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 silly romance, not naman silly, not those romance novels all the time that are on level 1. So try to go for the classics. Try to go for books that have been tested by time. Okay, and then gut feelings matter. Does your work feel complete? Can it still be made better? I remember that it came to the point, like after 3 or 4 full revisions of the manuscript of my thesis, my mentor wanted me to defend already. Because he was like, this can be, this can go, we can defend. But deep down, I was like, no, I don't think so. Like, I knew that there was still something missing. I knew that I could still improve, and so I told my mentor, "Sir, I'm going to stop. I'm going to enroll for another term. It's still within my 10 years. I will enroll for another term and continue working on this thesis." So, your gut feelings matter. And remember, at the end of the day, it's going to be you as the author. Your mentor can only do so much, encourage you and really advise you, but you'll also have to listen to your heart. Okay, so is this everything I want to say, or is there more? Are there things I want to change? Okay, so I mentioned this. Listen to more senior writers. They were there to help me, and senior writers will be there to help you. Ask yourself, is there anyone whose eye is valuable to your craft? Someone who can advise you. And then, of course, remember to be humble, especially if your mentor goes ugly, ugly, ugly. Make sure that, I remember when he said that there were moments when I really felt tears, fall, but I was like, I'm not going to take this as something that will destroy me. No, I will look at this as something that I can learn from, and I am going to better my writing. So be humble and thank the Lord for your mentors. Okay, then prepare for publishing. So once you're done with your manuscript, you print it out and then you email it, or you send the print out. I remember for me, my process was I printed it out. I sent it to a publisher, the publisher that one of my readers in the panel told me to send it to. Okay. And then I waited and waited and waited. I bugged the publisher, like I emailed, like, "Hello, may I know if it has passed your eye, if it will be published?" And then they give me dates again and all that. And after 1 year, I was like, should I wait or should I go? During that 1 year of waiting for them to come back to me, one of my friends who worked with OMF, she knew about my manuscript and she was like, "Janina, maybe you should consider OMF." And then she told me the background, Hudson Taylor, and it was my first time to hear that from her. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that Hudson Taylor was one of those behind OMF, like long at the beginning. And me being a reader, I knew the story of Hudson Taylor. Like, I love the missionaries of George Mueller, Adoniram Judson, and so at the end of that year of waiting for the other publisher, I told one of my mentors, I told her, "I think I'm supposed to give my manuscript to another publisher. I'd like to give it to OMF." And she said, "Okay, do it." And I did, and it was accepted. And so it made me smile. I'm like, hooray, I have a publisher now. So remember that life goes on and you cannot please everybody. So it's up to you if you're going to see like that 1 year of waiting. Like for me, it was up to me to see it as rejection, or could it just have been that waiting process wherein God was also teaching me something, like how to wait and and he was, I believe he was also leading me to the right publisher. So that one. So I think it's one of those things that you can pray about. Lord, lead me to the right publisher. Okay. And then when accepted by a publisher, be prepared to work with an editor because your publisher will give you an editor. Be prepared to see flaws in your writing because the editor will see stuff that you never saw before. And be prepared to revise. No matter how clean you think your manuscript is, you will be revising. And then have lunch, sorry, have fun during the lunch. Okay, so that's one of the beautiful things about finishing with the book finally. You'll have the lunch, and then if your publisher is OMF Publishing, they'll make it a beautiful lunch. I remember that the one that we had here in the village, we had really nice orange teddy bears. I'll never forget that because I love orange, and two, I love teddy bears. Okay, so next. All right, so this is how the book looks, the book cover. This is the actual poster that came out. Okay, and yeah, so A Night Bird Sings of Blindness and Fear. So that's it. That brings me to the end. I will stop sharing now. But yeah, so that is my journey. Whew.
Thank you, Janina, for sharing with us your journey. It's really wow, 10 years and 1 year of waiting for the publisher. So,
Yeah.
so I think the Christian life really is a lot of it is about waiting. No? So
Yes.
yeah, so thank you for sharing. There's a lot there in what you shared, and we saw your creative process, and you shared with us in your writing process. You shared with us 3 steps, right? And I took note of the third step you mentioned. Assess the protagonist, right? So in this book, A Nightbird Sings of Blindness and Fear, of course, you were writing your personal journey, so you were the protagonist, and um, that means you needed to dig into yourself, and
Yes.
digging into oneself is not an easy thing to do, right? So what hurdles did you have to overcome as you were digging into yourself throughout the writing process, and how did you overcome those hurdles?
Okay, one big one was were my tears. It's like because I mentioned a while ago that while I was doing the classroom exercise, I was already crying. So I realized that, oh, there are parts of my wound that still make me cry. And so I think that was also one of those reasons behind the 10 years, like why I couldn't go back to it right away, because I realized that God was using time also to heal
Mhm.
certain aspects of my life. Because sickness, people think that sickness is just physiological, but behind it, like as a 14-year-old girl, I had to remember, how was it like being 14, missing out on many of the things my classmates were doing? How was it like being so afraid? Because it came to the point where I was so afraid of eating out. I was afraid of leaving the house. And I would get palpitations, I'd lose my breath, things like that. And and so remembering that while I was writing, I was like, wait. Yeah, you confront your wound, you confront the struggle, and I guess by writing it also, in a way that's already a step of overcoming
Mhm.
the wound, or overcoming the struggle. So that one was one big thing, one big way of assessing the protagonist, assessing the I.
Mhm.
Because right, when you write about yourself, you use I. And one of the things I learned from my mentors, whenever you write about the I, remember that your book, like let's say it's 200 pages, although mine is less. Wait, let me see. How many pages? 151. That includes like the references. Okay. But 151 pages are not enough to capture your life. So
Mhm.
remember that, because there's a tendency when you write your personal narrative, now it's like, oh no, I did not write about this one, that one, that one, that one. And remember that, wait, your life cannot fit in 151 pages. So remember that your protagonist is just really a slice, a
Mhm.
slice. The I is a slice of you. That one.
Mhm.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Mhm. So you also need to be like objective, right, in looking at
Yes.
yourself. Mhm. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And remember again, no, when you get criticism, when they when your mentor says, your character here, it's not developed well, or when he says ugly, he doesn't mean that you are ugly. It doesn't mean that you're not a person I mean, separate
Yeah.
your I in the story from you. Even if the I is based on you, but remember that you are like, once you create the I, it becomes a creation. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, you talked about character development and imagination and metaphors. So I'd like to ask, um, uh, does reading fiction help a writer learn all these things?
Oh, very much so. Very much
Mm,
so. With a fiction, even if it's not really a true tale, I mean, not it can be based on something that happened, but it's really a fabrication. The story is supposed to be a fabricated tale. There's just so much of life in it.
mm,
Something like, for example, especially with fantasy, you read Narnia, you read Tolkien, and you'll see the many layers of how Jesus can be presented, things like that. So for me, like, even if I write nonfiction, creative nonfiction, I love fiction, and the techniques that you use for fiction are actually the same techniques in nonfiction, creative nonfiction.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I'd like to segue there because we received two questions through email, and these two questions I think are related. So I'd like to share with you, both of them, and you can answer together. No, um, one question. The first question is from Jenny Ho of Singapore. She's asking, how is this kind of writing related to creative nonfiction? And then the next question, which I think is related, is from Jeremy Nangaga, I think, Ngaga of Kenya, um, or Nyaga, I think. Would this work fall within the biography category or genre of literature? And could this go with other works of personal journeys?
Okay. First of all, let me tell you that it is creative nonfiction. Okay. Whenever you write your testimony, like, testimony is one of the forms of creative nonfiction. Now, what makes creative nonfiction what it is that it is written, so it's a true tale. It's like your story, or if it's a biography, it can be written about somebody else. Okay, it's a story written with the rules of fiction. So that would mean that there is the presence of the elements of fiction. There are characters, setting, the plot, theme, and it's written with using a point of view. Okay, so these elements are present in creative nonfiction. So when you write something like this, a personal testimony, or for this one, you call this is actually under the subgenre of memoir. Okay. Now, memoir is, yes, it is very much creative nonfiction. The difference between an autobiography and a memoir is that an autobiography takes you to a person's whole life. Okay. Again, even a person's whole life cannot fit in 500 pages. Just remember that. Okay. But an autobiography will take you from the start to the end, or at least, like a full span of a person's life. A memoir will take an area of that life. So, for example, with this one, it's about sickness. Okay, my journey with sickness. and be my journey with anxiety, my journey with my journey with being partially blind. I don't think I mentioned it this whole time. Now I'm actually partially blind because of my AVM. I lost half my vision. Okay, so that part, the sickness, it's here. So I don't write here about things like what did I not write? My swimming lessons when I was, let's say, grade 3. Okay, I mean, I don't write about it here because it has nothing to do with my tackling of sickness. Okay, so it's a memoir which is under creative nonfiction. Yes, and it's different from the autobiography. Okay, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I think you did. Here's a question from Yemima Pradipta. It's quite long, so I'll read it. Huh? I mean,
Okay.
she said, "Hello, my name is Mima, and I'm from Indonesia. I'd like to ask Miss Janina, when we start to write our personal faith journey, do you think it's important for us to be open, in quotes, to be
Mm-hmm.
open about ourselves? You said that it's important to be vulnerable so we can pour out our experiences better. But maybe there's still some part of us that is afraid to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we feel like it is a shameful past and it's something that we're not very proud of. Like maybe we're not ready for people to somehow judge us based on our past. And then in parentheses, even though we cannot handle anyone's opinion anyway, close parentheses. Do you think we should deal with the emotions first before writing? Or can we just deal with that while we are writing? Thank you very much and God bless you. From Yamina Pradipta.
Very, very good questions. Um, one thing I can say, um, writing helps heal the wound. There's this book. It's called "Writing Out the Storm," and although it has particularly had to do with sickness, it's like writing how you feel about that difficult time of your life. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be sickness. It can be, a heartbreak. It can be something broken in your life. Okay, it doesn't mean that whatever you write at, for the first time, it doesn't mean that that's what you want published. Okay, you can write for yourself first, especially if you know that you're still healing. Write for yourself first, and then put your writing in a drawer. and
Mm-hmm.
then and then I love what you said, like healing the emotions. I think that was what happened to me in the 10 years. Like you can bring your wound to God. And because it's a more powerful testimony if you can say in your writing, yes, I struggled with this, but this is how God healed me. And this is how I am now. You're able to narrate the transformation. And I think that is more powerful than if you write something that you're still undergoing. So for me, there is wisdom in not writing a book just yet. Like let's say, yeah, you're undergoing, your heart is like so open and like so broken. Um, there is wisdom in putting things in the drawer and not writing yet. And then when it's time, and I feel that God can tell you when it's time, then take it out of the drawer and write. And then you ask yourself, is this something that I can share to the world? Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Janina, for that. This is not a question, it's a comment from Jopen. You know Jopen Bawi from the Philippines?
Yes.
Yeah. So Jopen writes, I really like your CNF essay when red is my favorite color. Yeah.
I'm glad you read that. Now, that is, for those who haven't read it, it's an essay based on what I went through also, but it's not 151 pages. How many pages is it? I'm forgetting how much. It's really an essay, just an essay. but it made its way into a textbook. So that one. But I'm glad that you like it, Miss Joffen.
I haven't read it. Send me the link.
Okay.
We don't have questions anymore from participants, but I still have two questions now. Um, um, Janina, one of the challenges of Christian writers is the tendency to be preachy, especially
Yes.
when you're writing about your personal faith journey. How can you avoid being preachy when you are writing your personal faith journey? So how can you connect with readers who do not share your faith?
Okay. One is to do the technique of showing more than telling. Okay. You can actually present a lot of questions in your writing without answering them, and you allow the reader to answer them for themselves, you know.
Mhm.
So you can do that. The showing, not that, because it's different if you say, for example, God healed me from sickness versus um, I woke up without having pain in my head anymore. Could it be that God has healed me? So you see, like there's a kind of approach where you're allowing the reader to dive into something that is a possibility for themselves, because it happened to you, then it could happen to them. So they're able to connect more if you write in that manner. And another thing also, I remember that in my very first draft of my full manuscript, I wrote a lot of wisdom quotes. I mean, like, this is what I learned, la, 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 la. And I remember my mentor saying, Janina, this is too didactic. So in our language, too preachy. Okay, this is too didactic. What can you do to lessen it? And so what I did, because I did not want to remove a lot of the things that I learned, the insights from certain parts of my tale, was I made use of the I a lot. Like I said, something like, I believed or I felt that. So it becomes a truth to you. Like when the readers read it, they're like, oh, it's a truth to this character. And so they don't feel as if their own conviction is being what, forcefully or violently challenged. They see that now they can think, oh, because this character felt it, or then maybe, or believe this, then maybe I can think that way too. So there's that kind of dynamic, that kind of play. Okay. So there.
There's another question.
Mm-hmm.
Pahabol in Filipino. One more question that,
Sure.
that is chasing us. From Kelly Chua. If this if this testimony is used for devotional writing, can
Mm,
creative nonfiction format be used? So if this testimony is used for devotional writing, can creative nonfiction format be used?
yes. Because there are very many forms of creative nonfiction. So the personal narrative is one of them. The personal narrative doesn't have to be as long as a book, as a memoir. It can actually be an essay. It can be short. It can be and you can use that short little tale of what happened in the testimony. Okay, and use that to jump start the devotion, something like that. So it makes it interesting, very very interesting. In the same way, like a preacher, for example, uses a story in his preaching to introduce something meatier. So you can do that, yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Janina, your book, A Nightbird Sings of Blindness and Fear. So it won in the Gintong Aklat or Golden Book Award, which is it is one of the prestigious award giving bodies in the Philippines, and it is non-sectarian. So it means so it won in the inspirational category. So it means that of all the entries, your story had the biggest impact on the judges who may not share your faith, right? So, what does this mean to you? What is your personal takeaway from winning this award?
Oh, people are hungry for the Lord. Like if they were, if they read this book, like the judges read the book and they felt the impact, then that means that there's something about a person's life testimony that they know will give meaning to other people's lives. So for those here who are wanting to write their testimony, go for it. It's a beautiful thing when you're able to share Jesus through what he has done in your life. And then another thing about the Gintong Aklat Award, because I wasn't expecting it, So for me, it was like, wow, it's a huge blessing. And it was one of those things that made me go, thank you, Lord. And thank you for bringing me to the right publisher. Because the more also that I reflected on the process of bookmaking, the more that I realized that the manuscript is it's one big part of the book, but there are other things, things, for example, such as the cover design, things such as the editing, things such as getting it printed, things like that. So that sense of theme, it became much bigger to me because I realized that, wow, Lord, the book is not just it's not just me. It was such a big thing, a big team effort. And so it I guess it's one of my takeaways. When writing a book, it's not just you involved. It's so many more so many more people and more what other things. Other
Yeah,
things
yeah.
needed.
Yes, more people, and most importantly, the Holy Spirit, you said, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I think we're already running out of time. So, Janina, before we end, would you like to leave some parting words to our participants?
Okay, guys, friends, writers, write your story, write your testimony. It might be a challenge for you to write a book, but it's a good challenge. And believe me, you will come out better if you're able to finish it. um Take the writing journey as a journey. Feel yourself, like feel the tears, feel the ache, but also feel the grace of God as you write, because you realize when you write, you realize that, hey, God has truly been good to me. He's been good in this particular struggle, and I have him to thank. And what is the best way to thank him? Isn't it like you can share what he has done through your life? So write your story. That's it.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that should be the end goal really for you in joining this webinar, right? You want to learn how to write your story. Thank you, Janina, for the whole presentation. Very enriching, and for sharing your life, your words of encouragement. No? So before we go, we have one last announcement, which is also an answer to the question of Dikwa Taisu Olivier Joshua. He asks, when will be the next training? Okay, so
Ah,
so the next MAI webinar will be on the topic how to build characters with dynamic traits with Balas Zagoni. And this will be happening on November 15. So save the date, November 15, on your calendar for how to build characters with dynamic traits with Balas Zagoni. And Mr. Rocha, he is requesting, can you translate in French next time? So he has I think some webinars are done in French, I think, and some in Spanish.
wow.
So it's up to MAI to do that. So again, once again, thank you, friends, for joining us tonight or today or this afternoon in this webinar. So may you all be steadfast in your personal faith journey, and may you find the words, the time, and the courage to write your story and to share it with the rest of the world for the glory of God. So God bless us all, and thank you very much.